Hey guys, welcome back to Sgcarmart. Today on Backseat Driver, we are going to be talking about the Singapore Motorshow which just happened. So today we're going to be talking about the Motorshow. So 2025 this year versus 2024 this year. First of all, what do you think?
I thought it was quieter actually. I thought this year was a lot quieter than last year. And of course, last year was quieter than the year before. So I think it seems like it's a trend. It's getting quieter every year.
And I think this year was, the timing was interesting, let's say. So first day of Motorshow was the day after the COE go up by like 12,500 for Cat B. So I think the sort of sentiment and atmosphere was already a little bit So definitely I think it was a quieter experience all around.
Yeah, I feel like also it was quieter. I feel like last year it was a lot flashier. There were a lot of things like the EQG, was it?
Yeah.
I mean, like this year, I was just looking through the models again, and there were 0 concept cars this year. So, I mean, I think it's interesting because, in a sense, every single car that you saw there, minus one car, you can buy sometime in 2025 in Singapore. So I think that also probably speaks to, I guess, the objective that the brands have, right? They want to sell cars, and we cannot really blame them for it.
And especially since during last year's show, COE dropped the crazy amount, so I think a lot of people kind of were expecting that.
I don't really think so. I think people sort of already knew that the COE has been temperamental and it's been going north. So I don't think they expected it to drop. However, I do think that dealers are actually expecting to sell cars here. It's just another platform for them to sell. But I also believe that it's also another platform for them to launch their cars.
So, talking about the cars, any notable ones that you've seen this year that remains in your mind?
I mean, it's Yangwang for me lah. It's U9. Yangwang U9 is...
Technically, they didn't launch a car because the car is not available in Singapore.
Exactly. But I mean, if there has to be like one car, it has to be the Yangwang U9 lah. I mean, it's a car that dances. No? It's a car that dances, and it's a...
For me, I thought the car that caught my attention was the JQ J6 because I think it looks interesting, and it's priced at a price point that is compelling in some ways, right? It's under 200,000, so look, every car is expensive, but I think for that price point, for that segment, it delivers something quite different. Perhaps it's a function of sort of us being in the industry and having sort of probably seen these cars in overseas publications and stuff prior to this. So I don't think there were any huge surprises in any real way.
I also really like the JQ J6. Like when I first saw it in China, I thought it was a really good fit, and then I was thinking that it really all comes down to pricing, right? And for Cat B dual motor car, though it's not the fastest, but under 200,000, I think it's really quite a good deal in addition to all its like character of its look. Also, one thing I thought was very interesting was last year we saw the EV9, right? And this year we saw the EV5, and then it's going to be built at HMGIX. It's something
built at
it's going to be assembled, put together at HMGIX. Is it going to get that made in Singapore batch first 100? But I thought that was a pretty interesting thing to come out of HMGIX. Like, did they really talk about that before?
I mean, I think there were some speculations and some rumors going around. And again, I mean, considering the nature of the brands, right? Like globally, Kia falls under the broader Hyundai umbrella. So I don't think that's a surprise. I think it's perhaps surprising that we haven't heard like specifics about it before this Motorshow. But again, I think this is something that once you see, you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
So the cars that we've seen over this Motorshow, do you notice any similarities, any kinds of cars you see that, like what you said, this show seems to be a lot about pushing cars for sales, but any particular sorts?
Like what they say, right? It's like 70% of it is EVs. And I think if you look at the
electric and hybrids.
Electrified vehicles are 70%. If you go to the Motorshow, 50% of that 70% is actually all by Chinese brands lah. Right? There's also a new one, IM from Eurocars. I thought that was quite cool. Do I actually think that any of them stand out? Not at the moment, I guess.
Looking at Motorshow, I think it very much fits into what we know and expect to be trendy today, right? Electric SUVs. I mean, that's a lot of what we saw at Motorshow. And look, let's be real. Brands make cars to sell them, and they make the cars that people want. And as far as we are seeing now, people want this profile of cars. Obviously, the electric part, I think there's a bit more uncertainty about how much demand there is for that. But definitely for SUVs, there's a huge demand for that. We saw SUVs at every booth that we went to, right? I don't think there was a single booth that did not have an SUV. So I think that's very telling of where the market is at now. And I think that's also very telling of what we should continue to expect moving forward.
Talking about that, EVs, SUVs, how about between EVs and the hybrids? Do you see any sort of trend?
I mean, I think EVs are the flashy new thing to push. So I think for brands that have committed to going electric, that's what you expect. I think we did see some hybrid options, right? So like the Accord, eHEV, the CX-80 plug-in hybrid. So I think there are some hybrid options. I think on a sort of smaller scale, we see like Hyundai has their hybrids. So some brands still offer hybrids. I think the sort of attention-grabbing thing will be the EVs. But I think for a typical consumer, I think having those hybrid options are important, right? Because as we've talked about quite a lot, I think while EVs are very much available, I don't think that necessarily everyone wants an EV now, or everyone can use an EV now. So I think having the hybrid option is very important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see a range of hybrids in the entire hall, right? I mean, especially Toyota, right? The range of hybrids are all there. But like what Desmond said, I think people buy EV today not because they should, but because they can.
Currently, it's at a price point that was still a bit above ICE, but now it's really very, very competitive.
Hybrids and plug-in hybrids should still remain an option for people. I would love to own an EV, but because of the lack of infrastructure as of now, if my car finishes before 2030, where they pledge 60,000 charging infrastructure around the island, I may go for a hybrid instead.
As we've seen like last year, kind of felt like every other month we were at a new Chinese brand launch. How do you think Singaporeans or the market here is adapting, or are they more receptive to the Chinese now?
It almost feels like they don't have a choice.
No, I mean, I think that's very fair. I think that's a very real reality, right? I mean, the brands are there, right? And you are being exposed to them a lot more. I do generally think that people are less fixated on the whole notion of, a Chinese brand. And I think that really comes down to exposure, right? And let's face it, I think a lot of it is, at least in the past 2 years, driven by BYD. Again, I think the more you interface with them, the less foreign and different they become, right? You're just like, okay, it's another Chinese brand. So I think there's less hesitancy. I think based on some of the sales numbers that we've heard, I think there is definitely a demand for it. And I think we cannot run away from the fact that the Chinese offer a very singular competitive advantage, which is more often not value, let's say. I wouldn't say price specifically, but value, right? For your money, you're probably getting quite a lot more car compared to what you could get with a non-Chinese brand, for example. So I think there is a certain element of we can't really run away from it, right? There are so many Chinese brands now. But I think the products have proven themselves to be attractive enough to bring in new customers.
Yeah, and I think in a market like Singapore, where it's very temperamental and prices are really high for cars, for Chinese brands, when they come in, they definitely offer, like what Desmond said, it's more value, more competitive. And when you are in a market like ours, once you have that edge, right, with price, which is something that Singaporeans are always looking out for, you automatically gain an advantage. Of course, the question is always, what about those new entries like IM and stuff? Will they actually J-Cool? Will they work? You'll never know. I mean, when BYD first came out of commercial and into passenger vehicles, we were all thinking, maybe it's not going to work, maybe it's not going to fly. But look where it is today, man.
I think the sort of the next thing to wonder about and to consider is how will the market shift, right? Because we know that Singapore is ultimately a zero-sum game. For every car that one brand sells, it's one car that another brand is not selling. If the Chinese brands continue to be successful, that means someone else is losing out. Question of whether all the Chinese brands will make it, will manage to remain in the market, or if they don't, which brands fall off, or again, if they all manage to find some foothold and gain ground, someone else is losing out. And then there's a question of which other brands are losing out and what they're going to do about it.
Right, that's a very good segue actually into our next point, which is that, BYD and has always been boasting about the number one in sales in top in across all the models, all the dealers. So do you feel like the Germans are taking a lesser share of the pie nowadays?
I mean, definitely. I mean, like Desmond just said, right, it's a zero-sum game, right, in Singapore. If BYD is selling more, naturally, I think the Germans are selling lesser. Of course, there is this group of people whom I know very clearly. Their objective is very clear, right? To them, it's like, since COE is already 100,000, I might as well buy a high-end car. Makes more sense to them. They are the old school way of thinking.
You hang out
right?
with much more wealthy friends than I do.
But I think generally, to answer your question, the straightforward answer is yes. I do think that they are losing out.
But trickiest position are the ones kind of caught in the middle, right? Because at least the Germans have the advantage of being sort of long-established premium players. And I think it's the brands in the middle, right? Like let's say your Japanese brands, your Korean brands, who want to straddle that sort of gap between like mass market, like completely mass market, and then also wanting to have some premium offerings and trying to straddle that spectrum. I think those are the brands that also are going to be challenged, right? Because ultimately, everyone in Singapore is fighting for the same customer, fundamentally.
We did talk a little bit about kind of the ones that really caught our eye. But if you were going to buy a car, right, from the motor show, I mean, Yang Wang won't be selling in Singapore as of yet. If you were to buy one car, what would it be from the motor show?
Has to be one.
Just one.
Well,
if you can buy more.
Well, second credit must it be a car?
But actually, I wouldn't mind the WRX STI package. I thought that was quite cool. And it's a manual transmission as well. Nice color, blue. The rims, black. I would like it if it was gold. I would like it better if it was gold. But I think that would probably be one car that I wouldn't mind having.
I actually find the new 1 Series quite interesting. Again, it's not going to be cheap. Well, no, it's going to be expensive. But Cat A car, and I think again for my use case, I like a hatchback. I mean, let's be real, it's quite a simple car. It's not very fancy. It's not very shouty. It's not going to be very attention-grabbing in terms of feature technology. But as a car that works, as a car that gets you through the 80% of just boring day-to-day stuff, it does the job. And I think that's also something worth highlighting, that there was like, how many hatchbacks were there? A few?
A few.
A few?
I think
Of
there's a
them be a
couple
GR
of them.
Yaris, which
plus GR Yaris as well, yeah. I mean, I would love to have the GR Yaris too. I mean, that was definitely one of the cars, one of the highlights for me. But to pay 350,000, plus minus, for a 3-door hatchback seems a little bit outrageous. Is it? A little bit outrageous. Seems
not
quite
just
outrageous,
a little bit, it's very outrageous.
Is there a car from the show, doesn't have to be new, that you would recommend to people?
That I would recommend to people.
Oh, I would recommend an Avante Hybrid. I think I recommended it to a few people in my life, so I think that's quite a straightforward answer for me.
I would still recommend WRX. Yeah, it's a cool car, man. It's a cool car, comes in manual,
No,
nice
it's
package.
not fair to recommend that because not everyone got manual license.
Oh, okay, fair enough. No, but in all honesty, I think I don't think I'll go very wrong to recommend somebody to get the Sealion, the new Sealion 7. I think the Sealion is quite cool. And the SUV is a rage, right? It's like a constant rage. It has been a rage for years now. And if they sort of like the BYD Seal, because of its price point, well-spec, good looks, then the Sealion will automatically fit them better because they'll be like, okay, I had no choice but to buy the Seal because it was a sedan. And it really wasn't for me. I was actually more looking forward to like an SUV. Now there is that option. The Sealion is actually there. So I think that would be the car that genuinely, in all honesty, that would be the car that I'll recommend.
I mean, let's say on the sort of 200 price point, right? Like, it's a lot of car. I must say. Obviously, we haven't driven it, but like just sitting inside it, like the quality in there is quite impressive. And it feels quality, right? And I think that's something that is quite impressive. I mean, I was having some conversations and I've heard that there are people who move from much more premium brands to like a Sealion, which I think also probably says a lot about the quality of the product and obviously being a very attractively priced as well.
I thought it was a very grown-up, very matured sort of car. Again, I think it's because of the lack of rotating screen. I have nothing against it, but I think without it, just suddenly feel less gimmicky. It's like a real car, right? You sit inside, feels good, smells good, looks good, everything just seems really premium. It's all arranged in a very nice, neat manner, and you go in and tell yourself, this, if I cover the badge, it could be something else altogether, something more premium than a BYD.
Talking about BYDs, all these, I think it's hard to ignore that they're one of the catalysts that made the perspective on Chinese brands come so far. And the first big model for them to hit was the Atto 3. And I think one of the things I keep hearing about it is that not everybody likes this newish kind of design. Whereas in the Sealion, it's a lot more like more car-like, as we conventionally
in some ways it feels a bit traditional, right? Which is a bit ironic to say. It's also kind of indicative of perhaps where we'll see the products develop, because I think obviously with any new brand or any new product, you want to immediately get into the conversations, and it's much easier to do that when you are a little bit sort of controversial, a little bit sort of obviously being alternative. Whereas now, I suppose as they're trying to up the level of their products, I do think that we do see that they are sort of making more traditional choices when it comes to design and style, and I think that probably will help with their branding as well.
How would you grade this year's motor show? Let's say good, mid, or bad?
I think on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best and 1 being the worst, I think this year would be a good 6 for me. I think it's a 6. I think it'd be unfair to give it a 4 or 5. I think 6 sort of evens out everything. I mean, you got to give them credit, right? There was some nice, cool stuff happening. Honestly, I thought the facelifted Qashqai was a nice touch. That was the first one we went in, the first one we saw. It looks great.
So how about your rating on the motor show?
Like I would say I'll probably give it a 5.10. But I also think there is the question of like, what's the perspective you're going in? Because I'm going there as someone from the media. I'm not going there with the intention to buy a car, right? So I think this year I would say there's a lack of spectacle. Right, we didn't really see anything very flashy. Even with the sort of colour presentations, they were quite sort of a bit muted, a bit on the quieter side. Not many things going on. So in terms of like grabbing your attention, I think this year not quite a lot of that. So not much fanfare. So like not a particularly spectacular thing. Undeniably, the products there are there to appeal to customers. So from my perspective, perhaps not the most interesting motor show, but at the same time, I also fully understand where we are in the market. The core intention of motor show ultimately is still to sell cars.
Remember before COVID, there were stickers for you to grab. You know, there were like toy car models you can buy. I bought a GTR from there.
Like how I would frame it is that it's just this year felt very focused, right? It's very okay. The brands are all here to sell cars and make money, lah. Right? And
yeah, that's it. No, that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and not a lot more spent on, let's say, extras, superfluous things that don't directly impact their ability to sell cars.
Yeah, I think I see both of your points, because I kind of feel like this year was a little bit lukewarm, but when I wanted to put my finger on what exactly was, we've seen new brands, we've seen new launches, and they've got, like performance cars to dance. So it wasn't exactly without flair, but at the same time, it still felt like something was missing.
It's very two-dimensional, It wasn't something... It was just really dull, man, for me. It was just like going to another Cars at Expo.
Obviously, given the current climate, I think we also have to acknowledge that perhaps, brands are a little bit more conservative on
of course.
how much money they're willing to spend on an exhibition like that. Ultimately, it's PNC dollars and cents, right?
Yeah.
So I think, at least the sense I got is that, the brands were very invested in their products and in their cars. But I think there's also a little bit of cautiousness about not necessarily wanting to sort of just spend money on things for the sake of doing it. Be a little bit more cautious about their spending as well.
Lastly, do you think that, from what you've seen at the motor show, do you think that there will be some surprises coming up in this year, or will it just be another year kind of like 2024?
In all honesty, I can't really say given up on cars that are soulful and cars that are really nice, some nice JDM cars, right? But it's really more of just taking it as it comes. I kind of want to manage my expectations. I mean, I hope to see, again, Jimny 5-door as soon as possible. I hope to see some other cars coming to our market as well, some ICE cars, regular ICE cars if possible, even though that seems like a very far-fetched idea now for whatever reason, right? I hope to see at least 1 or 2 cars that are really interesting. That's why I said I thought the GR Yaris was actually quite a cool car, because pure ICE, 3-cylinder, it's cool. Yeah, exactly. But are there going to be any surprises? Do I foresee any surprises? Honestly, no.
I think for me, do I expect any surprises? No, because partially also because on our end, we kind of try to forecast what's coming to Singapore this year. I think it's also worth recognizing, trying to sort of evaluate where every brand is on their product cycle, and recognizing that at this point, I don't think that any brands that have like huge nameplates coming back. So I don't expect any huge surprises in Singapore this year. Partially also because we have to acknowledge that for Singapore, we tend to get all the models a little bit later than the rest of the world, so we kind of already know what's out there. If there were to be big surprises, it would be with brands coming in or brands leaving the market. From a product standpoint, I think we kind of know what to expect. Probably have seen most of the brand's product lineups, whether they're already here or they're soon to come. So I would be surprised more from a brand perspective.
So there you have it, guys. These are our thoughts for the 2025 Singapore Motor Show. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and comment in the comment box below and let us know what you think. Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? You can also follow us on TikTok. Our handle is @Sgcarmart. In the meantime, stay safe, be well,